Let's talk episode 1, The Phantom Menace. Welcome back. This is Will with the Padawan Pops YouTube channel and my co-host Kevin, and we are bringing you episode 11 of the Force with Friends podcast. Now, if you have been keeping up with the other 10 episodes, particularly last week, you know we are transitioning from an Ahsoka heavy podcast to one that over the next 9 weeks, we are going to be discussing the Skywalker Saga, the episodic movies, episodes 1 through 9, and we're going to see how those movies bridge together one story all throughout this saga. This week, we are going to be starting with The Phantom Menace and breaking that down, trying to capture the main themes and how it plugs in to the main story. So, Kevin, I know you were pretty excited about this. We were mainly talking, I guess, over the weekend, and then lately we were watching episode 1. And, you know, I don't think I've actually sat down and watched episode 1 uninterrupted for a while. So that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, no, I haven't either. It was fun to sit down and really just kind of focus on what the story is, because it's easy to go back and complain about it. There's a lot of things to complain about, but but at its core, I mean, it's a good Star Wars movie. If you take away all the little things that annoy me, I like it. I do enjoy the movie. So
for sure. I know this is kind of out there, but I've kind of just started looking at Star Wars because we complain a lot about 7, 8, and 9 and maybe Solo too. There's stuff in every Star Wars movie to complain about. So that's a good point. But for this, we're gonna list no complaints. We don't have a complaint section per se, just mainly trying to weave this story together into one big story, which I will say is the story of the Skywalkers. That's what we're going to get to. George would say it's Anakin Skywalker's story, but given kind of how things go, I think it's safe to say it is a Skywalker story as a whole. And so that's really where we're going to be looking at it from here out, is it's a Skywalker story. So today we are going to be looking at The Phantom Menace, as we said. So first, we're going to start off with our episode 1 experience. We're going to be looking at the theme of Palpatine pulling all the strings from the beginning. We're going to look at the idea of the Chosen One, and then we are going to see the folly of the Jedi. That is going to be a big theme in episodes 1 through 9. We get glimpses of that, but it's fairly evident in the prequels, I think, to say the least. Talking about our episode 1 experience, we were chatting about this a little bit earlier, but there is an age difference between us of about 7 or so years, I suppose. We clearly have different experiences. Did it come out in May of 99?
Yeah.
Was it May? Was that right?
I think it was.
Yeah, so May of
definitely summertime.
Yeah, so that would put me. I wasn't quite 6 yet, so I was in like kindergarten or about to be in kindergarten when this started. So I would imagine you being a little bit older probably had a different viewing experience. So let's talk about it.
Yeah, thanks for reminding me that you were in kindergarten at the time.
Hey, I'm in my 30s now. I feel like I'm old.
Yeah, no, for me personally, I was thinking about this a lot over the last couple days. It's probably, looking back, the most excited I ever was about Star Wars.
Yeah.
Simply because, I mean, I was 13, right? I was in middle school, and I loved the Star Wars movies, you know, like most kids, but I had really started to get into all the Legends and EU stuff. And so I had been reading the books and really just absorbing all that. And so at that time, I was just so excited about the idea of that there's this new, real, official movie stuff that's going to be coming out again. You know, they made new movies recently, and I was excited for those. But at the same time, I didn't have that lens yet as an adult of, I hope they don't mess it up. I hope it's okay. You know, it was just, it was really like as a 13-year-old who had been expanding in all this Star Wars stuff and just loving every bit of it. It was really exciting to be like, there's new movies coming out. So thinking back to it, that's probably just the most pure excitement I've had about Star Wars, just because I didn't care about anything else, right? Like I loved it, and I was so excited about more. So
no, that's cool. So you said you were in middle school. So did you I don't think I had actually been to a movie theater at that point in my life yet. So did you go watch it like the night it came out? How did that go?
Trying to remember if I did for that one. I know I
Hmm.
did. Like for Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith, I went to like midnight showings with friends. I
Yeah.
can't remember what I did for the Phantom Menace. I mean, I know I saw it. I know it was opening weekend,
Hmm.
but I can't remember if I was there at the first showing or not for that one.
For me, the main thing I remember, like being a kid, I had seen episodes 4, 5, and 6. I want to say I had seen those at that point because I would remember going to like the movie store and stuff. At the time, we had a local movie
Yeah,
store, and I remember like picking them out and stuff. But I remember nothing of Star Wars per se. I don't think I really started being super interested in Star Wars until Attack of the Clones. I would have been a couple
yeah,
years older at that point. I guess 3 years older then, and I did watch that one in theaters. So my main thing I remember from episode 1 is all the marketing and toys and stuff, because that
oh
would have been
yeah,
geared directly at my age. So I mean, I don't know how many 5 or 6 year olds are super excited about going to KFC. I'm not excited about going to KFC at 30, so I can't imagine at 5 I would have been either. But they had all kinds of cool Star Wars stuff there. I remember that specifically. So I remember like asking my parents, "Can we go?" Because they had some kind of Darth Maul
yeah.
thing or something, and I hated like kids don't like fried chicken that has like a bone in it or anything. But I remember going or wanting to go just so we could get that stuff. And then I remember the toys at like Kmart and Walmart. And
Yeah.
saying Kmart, I guess, dates me as well because that that doesn't exist
Yeah.
anymore. But I had the Darth Maul toy that broke apart and had a magnet that would hold it together. I
Yeah.
had the Obi-Wan Kenobi, and they had those little chips that you could put in the little machine that Qui-Gon has, like the little
Yeah.
comm machine, and they
Yep.
would say a line. So I remember I had like a Qui-Gon, an Obi-Wan, and a Darth Maul. I don't know that I had any past that because I wasn't fully into Star Wars. But
Right.
my main experience really revolves around the toys, which is funny because now I'm like 30 and have a whole wall full of Funko Pops.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, outside of that, I may have saw the movie on VHS before Attack of the Clones, but Attack of the Clones is really where I started Star Wars. So you had a little bit of a jump on me.
And it was different too because
Mm-hmm.
with the movies that the new sequel movies that came out recently, there had been Star Wars projects, right?
Right.
Leading up to that, not movies necessarily, but like the media drought that led into episode 1, like other than the books that were being written, which were fantastic. I mean, it
Mm-hmm.
was, I think that's why it exploded, is because I think everybody was just like, Star Wars is coming back, like,
Yeah, yeah.
right? So
So
it
what
was
would
it
that
was
have
really cool.
been? 83 would have been Return of the Jedi. And so they re-released the original trilogy in what, like 1993 or something like
Yeah, it was in
that,
the
like the
90s.
the
Yeah.
10 year. And so it had been 16 years since new Star Wars in theaters, and at least 5 years or a few years since the re-release in theaters. So it had been some time since
Yeah, it
people
had
could
been a while.
experience Star Wars on the big screen, especially with the VFX, all the stuff
Yeah.
like that weren't quite the same in the 70s and 80s. So it's pretty
Yep.
cool.
Yeah, it was a fun time for sure.
Yeah. So moving ahead into our next portion, speaking on the main themes of Star Wars as a whole. So, episode 1, we narrowed it down into three big things I think that contribute to the story. Now, there's probably more than
Yeah.
this, but we thought these were the big ones as far as what drives Star Wars going
Yeah,
forward.
it's a good synopsis of the main
Yeah.
elements of the movie.
And so I was texting you when I started watching it, and I don't think I've actually watched the opening crawl and paid as much attention to it as I have this time. But it's like I told you, it might have been the most boring synopsis I've ever had. Like it starts
Yeah.
with trade disputes over
Yeah.
taxation or something like that. It sounded like a civics class, but
Yeah.
really that starts the whole idea that Emperor Palpatine, not yet Emperor, but Darth
Yeah.
Sidious is pulling the strings in like some super mundane ways to get to
Yeah.
where he wants to be. And as boring as taxation of trade routes or whatever it is that they're starting off with the separatist, it's a big deal.
Yeah. No, I agree. Like that opening crawl comes up, and I think I mentioned it to you. It's like I feel like George is like, this is going to be super political, and I want everybody to know from the onset.
Yep.
But it's, I mean, if you look at Sidious though, like it's all about the politics and how he takes advantage of it, and
Yeah.
just people's nature, right? Like he knows what these people in government, what they're going to do, and what they're going to be afraid of, and so you can't really tell his story without it being political because
Yeah.
I mean, we all know. I mean, this
How
is
he
not
did
going to be
it.
a political show, but politics is messed up, right? We all know that. We all
Well,
see
yeah.
that, and so
From they had the onset of humanity, right? From
yeah,
the onset
right.
of politics,
Just
because
as long
people
as
are
man,
corrupt.
as long as man has had government, right?
Yeah.
Like it's been messed up, and so
Yeah.
that's a huge part of how he's able to manipulate things. And
Oh,
so
for sure.
it's not an interesting crawl at all, but it definitely sets up the tone for what's going on and what's going to be going on. So
Yeah, and as you watch the movie going through, I will say, not that we're going to go by this movie like frame by frame, but
yeah,
for a somewhat boring crawl, they did clean it up pretty quickly with Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan on that
starts off
ship. So,
it starts off pretty
yeah,
exciting. So
yeah, that was good. They
I'll give them
hint the
that.
politics, but they get you to action pretty quick in
Yeah.
this movie. So that was good.
Yep.
But we look at the movie, and really all throughout this movie, Palpatine's hands are all in it. We see that he's kind of trying to get or Queen Amidala, not Senator Amidala, but Queen Amidala, essentially to fold really early on
Mm-hmm.
Naboo. He really viewed Naboo as important, as to where the Separatists were going to get it. And I mean, he's pushing for a vote of no confidence on Valorum. Like,
Yeah.
he's just constantly making moves to try to get to where he is in charge, and there's some sort of turmoil so he can step in. And Queen Amidala actually like kind of foils him a time or two, but ultimately he still gets
Yeah.
what he wants.
Yeah, and like you said, Naboo's like the perfect place to do it, right?
Mhm.
Under Republic control technically, but right
Yep.
there, almost on the outer rim. And so we see he can control the narrative, like what it gets out of the planet, what information escapes, and you're right, he just wants to create the turmoil he needs, right? He needs the people back in the government to be like, this is happening to one of our planets, like we need to be concerned
His
about
planet.
it. So yeah, his planet.
His planet.
And so, yeah, from the onset, you can see that he doesn't care, right? The treaty doesn't help him necessarily, right? He doesn't care if Padme dies. He doesn't care.
No.
It's just he needs the turmoil, right? He needs people back home to see, oh, this is an issue and it's not being handled, right? So
Yeah.
he's definitely pushing that narrative he's got to find some way to get this guy out. And
Yeah.
what better way to do it than just making people afraid, right?
Yeah, and he needs it to be his planet so he can kind of be like that bold leader, because people will resonate with it being a personal thing for him, even though it's not. It is.
He gets that sympathy vote.
Yeah.
Right?
So he's doing that. He's making the connections while he's causing the trouble on one end. So it's an interesting thing. Like, the politics is boring to a lot of people, but the way he's doing it, knowing that every single domino is one step closer to him trying to overthrow the Republic,
yeah,
it's a pretty big deal. So it's interesting to see that. That's one side of the thing, but it's not just a political thing. It's also a force thing as well. So we see him as Darth Sidious throughout this movie. He has an apprentice in Darth Maul. So while he is also getting the politics set up to set up a rule where a Sith Lord can be ruling the government, at the same time he is building up the Sith and the rule of two to challenge the Jedi head on as well. And that's where I think a lot of people like to focus, is on the dark versus the light.
Yeah, and I mean, we'll talk about it when we get into the folly of the Jedi, but the way he's able to do it while, I mean, staying completely hidden, right? Like that nobody even picks up anything until it's too late. But I think and I would like to see even more expansion on what he's done, because you're right, politics is boring, but at the same time, I do think we'd all be super interested to see more of like what were the machinations he was working behind the scene that we don't see, like what were the conversations he was having, the buttons he was pushing. I'd be intrigued to get more detail on how specifically he went about these plans, beyond what we just see in the movies. But
yeah, and I think, kind of looking more along the Sith side of things, we get, he's got an apprentice in Darth Maul. And Darth Maul, I think it's Darth Maul, says, "At last we will reveal ourselves," or something along those lines. So this is like a thing that's been going on for a little bit.
Yeah.
We know with Plagueis, I mean, just from what
Yeah.
he says, not even looking at like the expanded universe or literature or anything like that,
Yep.
we know that he's not like the first line of this. And so I think we're going to get a little bit more expanded upon that on Disney Plus over the years, it sounds like, with the Acolyte and other things.
Yeah.
But
And
they've been in hiding.
oh, go ahead.
And so this
Yeah.
is the time. Like the government is setting up at the right point, and the Sith are at the point they need to be at, and it's all about to converge. One thing too, and this is jumping slightly ahead to kind of bridge Attack of the Clones and the Phantom Menace, but in Tales of the Jedi, and I know I'm getting out of the movies now, but in Tales of the Jedi, we learn that, like, okay, Darth Maul, quote unquote, dies on Naboo, but so does Qui-Gon. So as all the Jedi are going to Qui-Gon's funeral, we see he's already groomed Count Dooku and has been doing that. So in this timeline of the Phantom Menace, he's already preparing his next Padawan because they're dispensable to him to a great degree. He doesn't care. He's just trying to get to his power. So we see the wheels never stop turning. So Darth Maul dies, not even really a hiccup in the plan. He has Dooku right there ready to go. And within days of the Phantom Menace ending, he already has his next Padawan in place. So kind of crazy.
Part of what we see in that, which Tales of the Jedi is amazing. I love Tales of the Jedi so much.
Chef's kiss.
But part of what we see there, right, is Dooku grieving over Qui-Gon, and that's kind of like his last straw, which is what draws him to Sidious. So yeah, I mean, it's right there along the same timeline of what's going on with the Phantom Menace.
So to wrap that section up, he's working with these separatists, and then he's also working against the Jedi. So he's pulling the strings from very early on. And as we move into episode 2 next week, we see this is happening on a much, much larger scale. But as the movie goes on, we get this idea of the prophecy of the chosen one, and we come across this slave child on Tatooine named Anakin Skywalker. So Kevin, let's hear about the chosen one here.
Look, I'm a little annoyed by how vague this prophecy is. I like the story and I like the narrative of it, but I think some of the you can discuss, good gosh, what balancing the Force means for forever, right?
And you're gonna
have a million different interpretations of that.
Yeah.
The part of it is this prophecy is just super vague, but part of it is that also everybody thinks they know what it means, right? For whatever reason, the Jedi have come to the conclusion that it means the end of the Sith, right? But that's, like, if you look at what the prophecy is, it doesn't mention the Sith, right? It just talks about this guy with no father will bring balance to the Force, right? And so I think the vagueness of it allows people to kind of, like, potentially, like Qui-Gon, just latch on to something and be like, oh, this must be it. Like, this has got to be it.
Right.
I mean, this is based off what? Just simply how strong he is in the Force. Now, he turns out to be right, so can't fault him too much. But I've always, that's a little annoyance of mine, just how vague that prophecy is, because it doesn't really, it makes it seem like a final thing, right? That prophecy, the idea of a chosen one, it brings to mind the idea of some, like, finality. But there's really not, right? Like, this stuff kind of continues to go on. The narrative, though, of Anakin being the chosen one and how it sets up with Qui-Gon, I mean, I really like that. I enjoy that part of the movie, and I think that part was well done, at least.
Yeah. So the story, kind of like what we said to start, the story is a Skywalker story. Yeah. So this really is the start of the Star Wars story. So once they do get to Tatooine, so their ship just miraculously has an issue. They land on a planet that's not under Republic control. They need help. They come across Anakin, and the rest really is history. He is very much Force sensitive with the midi-chlorians, or he's more adept to it. At least we learn that it's even greater than Yoda, is what they say. And at the same time, and really the way George writes this is perfect. Like, nothing is happenstance with the Force and things like that. Yeah. But Padme, instead of being, on Naboo or whatever, she's off-world, and she's playing as a handmaiden, essentially. And so she comes across Anakin Skywalker, which eventually is going to continue our Skywalker story.
Yeah.
So everything, like, for the future of this galaxy, these events on Tatooine play a big role going forward.
Yeah, no, for sure. Those are the parts of the movie where you definitely feel like the story gets it right. It's just in setting up, and again, I love this movie. I think there's some really fun parts of it. I really enjoy the pod race. I like obviously the lightsaber battles and the
Yeah.
action part of it. It's fun, but the story does such a good job of setting up and leading into, right. We had known this original trilogy, but beginning to kind of move, eventually moving towards that. Right, the end goal is to create this narrative that's going to make us even more invested in this original trilogy, and I do think it sets a really good job of kind of just showing how things came together. And so, yeah, no, too, I agree with that point for sure. Just the way that all that stuff was brought together at that one instant and that one point is the perfect. It's really the perfect start for this story, I think.
Yeah, for sure. And Qui-Gon, you mentioned it a little bit, but he's very much into the prophecies, and the new literature and canon now really hammers that home even more. So if you read Master and Apprentice, there's a lot about prophecies in there that revolves around Qui-Gon for good or for bad, that he's so tied up in all of these.
Yeah.
But it's good that this Jedi is a little bit off the beaten path and as interested in these prophecies, because the rest of them kind of just turn their nose up to this stuff. Almost to a fault, it does start this spiraling of the galaxy is what we're going to see, because he is too old. He's going to have a lot of issues. They kind of take him from his mom. They can't bring her as well. We see there's all kinds of issues with this chosen one, as to where if they got him when he was 1 or 2, when they got everybody else, maybe he grows up to be the perfect Obi-Wan or whatever, that's to a T Jedi and brings balance a different way. But we get an imperfect chosen one, which I think is pretty interesting as well.
Yeah, because in a lot of ways that removes the just direct nature of like the chosen one's path, right? Because now, because he's older and because he hasn't had these things set for him at the start of what a Jedi is and what a Jedi does, some of which is probably overreach by the council, but it does open up his potential to go a lot of different ways, because he's seen and experienced things that are not good, right, on his planet, despite his good nature, right? There's a lot of, we see eventually a lot of bitterness and frustration from his past, and especially with, I'm not going to get into other movies, but with his mom. And a lot of that is set up at the start here with the fact that he's already faced not a good life, right? Like he's kind of been in the midst of some crappy stuff, which will ultimately be a big part of what he does and why he chooses the things he chooses.
It's great storytelling. Like
it is.
Yeah. And George, I mean, he pulls in all sorts of influences between, Hindu and Christianity and Buddhism and all these different ideas to bring this story together to get something that really appeals to everyone. And I think he did a great job at it. And when Anakin gets to Coruscant, and this is going to tie us in to our next section about the folly of the Jedi, because that's a main theme here. But when he gets to Coruscant, Qui-Gon's pretty adamant that he's the chosen one. And Obi-Wan isn't. We get that little bit of tension there between them, because Obi-Wan is always to the book, and Qui-Gon is barely, on the front page or the back page of the book. He certainly isn't within the book. He's around it. But he's adamant. The council is not. So we get that beginning of the friction that will ultimately play a big role in Anakin Skywalker's life in this story. But they're not quite sold on this prophecy of the chosen one, but their interest is at least a little bit piqued. So they grant Qui-Gon the ability to train this boy, and then Qui-Gon dies, and Obi-Wan ends up being the one who will be training this chosen one. Obi-Wan, whose Jedi trials essentially was just defeating Darth Maul. Like, that's how they say he's a Jedi now, right? Isn't that what canon kind of goes by? Does he have to go through the trials?
I actually don't know. Because earlier, doesn't he say he's already...
He says he's ready for him.
Yeah. Oh, right? He is ready. That's right. But then there's no way he did the trials, because it's like right after he kills Maul that they confer on him the rank of Jedi Knight. So
yeah, he kills a Sith Lord. So I feel like that's
a better resume than probably most of the other Jedi. So
only one other has killed a Sith Lord. So and that was his apprentice. So yeah, I mean, we see that the handoff process, Anakin's start of the Chosen One is nothing but smooth. I mean,
it doesn't go well.
And it really ties in, like you said, to we're trying to build up to episodes 4, 5, and 6. Well, seeing this chosen one with an unorthodox past and having all these issues, it plays into Luke Skywalker a lot as well. So I really like how they tie the two together from episode 1 and episode 4, having that unorthodox past, having that trauma of losing their first master very soon after meeting them. So there's some parallels there that brings this chosen one kind of full circle with his son as well. But back to that point on the folly of the Jedi, which will be our final point in this podcast. They don't necessarily want Anakin. They don't really want to send a full-blown I don't know, battalion of Jedi or whatever it may be. They just send Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan back to Naboo. They really kind of get bamboozled by Palpatine the whole way. He's right under their nose. How does all this factor in?
It's really interesting because I hadn't thought about this before watching it this time. But this whole prophecy about balancing the Force and what. But you look at like Qui-Gon and the Council, and you see this like unbalance, right? Like, and it goes back when Qui-Gon's talking to Obi-Wan at the very beginning, right? He's saying, "Be mindful of the now," essentially, not keeping your thoughts ahead to what's next, because Obi-Wan's talking about how he has this bad feeling, and you see this kind of separation between Qui-Gon and the Council, where the Council has their mind set in the future, right? They're trying to control what happens. They're essentially afraid of the potential of bad things, right? It's a very self-serving mindset for a Jedi Council to have, right?
For people that are selfless people,
sacrificial guardians, right? Their mindset is, hey, here's a kid in front of us who probably would benefit from some love and care and empathy, and he's had a hard life, but we're just really worried about what he's going to do in the future, right? And so, and it bugs me so much how condescending they are in that meeting, like just so smug with like, oh, you're afraid? Like, well, yeah, of course the kid. Of course the kid's afraid. So just the level of like condescension that they speak with him too, right? Like that they have it under control. They know what they're doing, and they're not going to mess with the potential that something bad could happen, even if it might be the right thing to do. And then we have Qui-Gon on the other side, who he cares nothing about looking ahead, right? Like he's all about the now, in the moment. This kid's the chosen one. And to your point, talking about how bad the start is for Anakin and his training, like the Council was right about the darkness in Anakin's future, right?
Yeah.
That was a potential that was there. And if Qui-Gon was a little more not just in the moment, but looking ahead, maybe that's something he would have picked up on too. It might have been a little more careful, right? But to be okay with, he talks to Obi-Wan at the end. He's like, you got to train him. Like, this has to happen. It is him, without acknowledging the fact that the Council doesn't like him. He's not going to be treated fairly, right? Like, he's got to know that. And so you have these two sides of the Council and Qui-Gon who just, they're looking at different pictures from different lenses, and they're not getting the whole picture. And so Anakin was kind of, he didn't really have a chance in some ways, because he wasn't really set up from the beginning to be given a fair shot. And then Obi-Wan, who's going to be training him out of obligation, right? Who didn't really agree with it, like you said. He's doing it. He tells the Council, look, I'm going to do it because I made a promise, not because I think it's right, not because I think it needs to happen. But I did make a promise to my master, and so I'm going to do it. Gosh, from the get-go, Anakin is just kind of, he gets the short end of the stick in terms of joining the Jedi Order. And then from there, it falls apart, right? Like, he never makes amends with the Council. They never really trust him. That's looking forward a lot, but you can just see from the beginning the Council and their need to, again, just protect themselves, and it's so self-serving that they can't have compassion for a kid who just left his home planet and is just trying to find some answers, right? Like that's kind of messed up. So it's a lot. I mean, it's a lot, right? That happens within a short period of time that really sets his path, I think, in a lot of ways.
Yeah,
that was a long.
No, that's really. I don't really have too much to add to that, but in this movie we do just get little glimpses of how incompetent the Jedi are, and we've talked about it a little bit when we were talking Ahsoka, because Ahsoka has some of those same issues, and so these issues they have, whatever this is, 19 years before the Battle of Yavin. I think that would be 19 BBY, and then you look at Ahsoka, which would have been a decade after the Battle of Yavin, at least probably like 13 or 14 years, I think's what timeline goes, and you still see the consequences in her, right? Like we see these Jedi issues in her as well. So this is a long-standing issue that they really miss the point. They're so rigid, they're so to the book, that they're so blind to what's actually going on. Palpatine's pulling all the strings. The Chosen One has been dumped in their lap. They set him up for failure and essentially gift wrapped him to Palpatine as he's pulling all the strings. Because I don't know, I'm not sure as far as canon goes, but I doubt in episode 1 Palpatine is planning on Anakin being whatever, right? Like at the onset of the episode. So when he's starting all these trade blockades, I doubt he's banking on a kid from Tatooine being his next apprentice.
Right.
But that's how it turns out. They make him into the monster that he turns into step by step over the course of 12 years is what the prequel trilogy goes over. I think 12 or 13 years or something like that. So unfortunate to see their folly, but it plays out, really, we said it plays out through Ahsoka. It plays out through the sequels, 7, 8, and 9. We see a lot of those.
With it,
Luke Skywalker struggles with these issues, and he's essentially reading the history book. This episode, really, there's a lot of complaints about episode 1. I have plenty of complaints about episode 1. It's goofy in some aspects. The special effects aren't incredible, but at the same time, they probably started those around 1996 or 1997, so give them a pass on that. But there's the dialogue is not great. Again, politics are not interesting, but as far as story goes, George knew the story he was telling, and the things that he set up in Star Wars Episode 1 play all throughout. They fit in well with the original trilogy. They really fit in well with the sequel trilogy, too, if you look at it from a big picture lens. They set up well in the spinoffs with Ahsoka. Tales of the Jedi goes on during it. There's a lot that this episode sets us up for. And so if you're watching this as the very first installment of Star Wars, all the groundwork is laid for where you're going over the next 9 movies plus series, essentially.
One thing I was going to add is that I do think this is my favorite fight choreography is in the Phantom Menace.
Oh, it's so good. I was thinking that too.
Throughout these movies, I mean, we've talked about it before, just the choreography and the physical batons that they use. Attack of the Clones, and
they're like metal, right?
Yeah,
is what they use on the set.
I feel like they start to add more like twirls and flourishes. I love the Phantom Menace because it's like it's agile, but it's also very intense, right? Like you watch them fight, and they're actually swinging these things at each other for a long time. So
it's well choreographed.
I love the choreography in the Phantom Menace so much.
Now I will ask you this. Okay. You had seen all of the originals before episode 1, like you were way into it. How do you, like, as far as your excitement level, going from watching the original trilogy lightsaber fighting, which not as inspiring as the prequels, how excited were you to see that?
Oh, it was it blew my mind, right? Not I mean, just the speed of it, the intensity of it, the precision of it, but also the fact that you just have this dude who's like, I don't have one lightsaber blade. I got two.
When like, it opens up with 2.
Man, that blew my mind. Oh, that fight. That's probably the biggest reason you go back and see that movie in theaters again. Is to watch that final duel. Like, it was so good.
Yeah. And the music with it and everything, it was a home run all the way. Go ahead, sorry.
I was just gonna say I was whistling and humming other music in this. I was the droid battle army music.
Oh yeah, I love that song. I've been putting that on a lot of my reels and stuff too lately. If you haven't noticed.
Yeah, so I mean, Williams didn't lose a beat. I mean, the soundtrack is still so good. So
yeah, as far as that battle goes, it's just kind of throwing it out there, way off script. But last night when I was watching it, I wasn't sure. I think it's still number 2 for me. I think number 1 is going to be Anakin and Obi-Wan, just based on the story behind it.
Yeah,
but that's choreography goes. I think episode 1 probably is a better fight, just as far as that goes. But yeah, that's like the big payoff is you get to sit and watch the greatest potentially lightsaber duel ever. Very cool.
It's my favorite for sure.
So bonus segment here. We didn't put this in, but we had joked around about it. We had joked around about it off camera last week, but we were going to have a what do our wives think about this segment, and neither would agree to get on camera, but both were very opinionated having to watch the movie with us. So What did Brittany have to say about this?
So the two things I distinctly remember her saying, one was when Obi-Wan at the beginning makes the quip, you were right, negotiations were short. I think I heard her like audibly groan at that. I was like, yeah, I know. Like, because look, I'm not going to talk about it long, but the humor in this movie is so aware of itself. Like, I just expect Obi-Wan to be like,
yeah,
right after that.
That Star Wars humor, though, like at least episodes 1 through 6, that is Star Wars humor.
It's not nearly as good as the original trilogy. There are points in the original trilogy I will always laugh at just because they're so in character, they're so well done, and we'll get to that in the future.
Yeah.
But the other thing that she said that made me laugh was, what % of this movie is this pod race? So
that's one of my questions.
It goes on
well.
for a while. So
I do not like the pod race.
How much of this movie is this pod race? I like it. I like that it's so different from everything else in Star Wars.
I don't like it at all.
There's nothing else like the pod race in any of the other Star Wars movies.
So long.
It's too long, right? They could go 2 laps and it'd be fine.
I think I was texting you like, as far as me watching episode 1, when I get to the pod race, I go do something else for like a half hour or 45 minutes and come back for the lightsaber.
That's hilarious.
Like, this was the first time I've watched it through without quitting during the pod racing. But Ashley, when we were watching it, I don't know what her deal is with Natalie Portman, but she does not like her. Like on the episode of The Office where Kevin is like, Pam hates the Monster Mash. Like, that is Ashley with Natalie Portman. When we were watching this, I don't even remember what scene it was, and she goes, she is terrible. I'm like, what are you talking about? And she goes, everyone likes her. She's terrible, at least in this movie. Wow. Like, she's giving these lines horribly. I said, well, they weren't necessarily written well for her. You know, George didn't do her or Hayden or Jake Lloyd any favors in this dialogue. And she was like, well, Obi-Wan has to say all his lines and he does fine. I'm like, well, it was Jedi lines.
Some of
it was
a
little bit different, but she like went on probably for 45 minutes just picking out Natalie Portman's lines.
Man,
and I will say, after watching it, like the delivery isn't great on all of them. Like, she comes across a little bit brash, but that's her character as well. But just as her sitting there watching it, she took great offense at the way Natalie Portman was delivering her lines.
Just wait till she gets to the Attack of the Clones run.
I'm not ready for that. So that's the What Did Our Wives Think segment number 1. Brittany did not like the jokes, and Ashley has great issues with Natalie Portman as Padme Amidala. So I'll be excited to see where it goes from here. So.
Which I think it's fair to say neither of our wives would even be watching Star Wars if we weren't involved in the situation, probably.
Yeah.
So
Ashley likes Star Wars, but she's more so Harry Potter, Doctor Who. So I don't know that she just turns it on for fun.
Yeah, like that's how Brittany is. I mean, she keeps up with it. She enjoys it. She likes the shows now, but otherwise she wouldn't bat an eye at it.
So this may be my favorite part of our podcast over the next episodes is
it's going to be entertaining.
What did our wives think about it? We need to get them on at some point before it's over, just to let them deliver these strong opinions all at once.
Honestly, I think Attack of the Clones might be the best chance. They can talk about the romance portion.
It's going to be good.
Movie.
Yeah. So that's a good segue for us. Yeah. That's it for the Phantom Menace. That was not an extensive coverage of the movie by any means. It's like a 2.5 hour movie, but we tried to hit the high points. And as we go through next week, we will talk Attack of the Clones, see how it picks up on the themes from the Phantom Menace and then carries them through and what it sets us up for next in Revenge of the Sith. So that's next week. Please don't forget to like this video and subscribe. If you're on Spotify, you can give us a 5-star rating and subscribe as well there. That will be great. That will help us grow. Otherwise, thanks so much for watching. It still blows my mind that anybody chooses to listen or watch this. It's just kind of a dream come true that anyone's interested in listening to our Star Wars opinions. So truly, from the bottom of our hearts, thank you so much. We'll catch y'all next week, and may the Force be with you.